So after the shooting happened, Las Vegas PD swooped in, and what really happened during the whole questioning period and so forth?
Well, I mean, it was a crazy uh, period. I mean, there were shots fired. People were all over the place. I think after the shooting, Suge Knight drove down the street, and two bicycle cops went up. So you really have a hectic scene. You know, people are everywhere. They're trying to control. They're trying to find witnesses. It's really a hard thing to do.
Okay.
So at that time, they're just trying to control the scene and find witnesses.
Okay. Now, in terms of the witnesses from death row, what happened?
Most of them didn't want to speak to the police.
Yeah.
I don't know how many they talked to. At that time, not more than just a few, and most of them had nothing to say. Suge Knight had nothing to say. So, I mean, it was really, it's hard because they're in Las Vegas, they're dealing with a bunch of Compton connected gang members that they don't know, you know, and the gang members don't know them. So, you know, sometimes the gang members might know a cop and they might talk to him a little bit, even off the record or whatever. But they're, you know, they had no, nobody that really knew who these guys were. I don't even know at the time if they had realized how big Tupac was and that this case could come back to, you know, still be around 20 years later on the anniversary, you know, that you know, this is happening.
Okay. So, but you had informants in place in Compton at this point?
Yeah, we've been around for a while. Like I said, nobody knew these gangsters better than Tim and I, except for maybe our boss, Reggie Wright, and the two other gang officers that were in our unit, Eddie Gary and Ray Richardson. So we knew the players, and we already had a network of informants.
Okay.
Back in Compton.
So what exactly were these informants saying?
Well,
There was several actually.
yeah.
Like how many informants did you get, you know, the Orlando story from?
Probably 4 to 5.
So 4 or 5
different ones. Some on the South Side's connection with the South Side gang, and some of the connection with the mob.
Okay.
Some that were in Las Vegas, some that were in Compton, and knew things when they got back to Compton.
Okay. Were any of these informants actually there when it happened, or were these all secondhand stories?
Not that I've spoken with, no.
Okay. So none of them were actually there
No.
when it happened. These were all stories that they heard.
Correct.
Okay. Was the stories consistent with all the informants?
The stories were consistent, and actually one of the informants got it from Orlando Anderson himself. And some of the things that, it wasn't just the statements, but some of them had seen Orlando Anderson with a .40 caliber Glock around that time of the shooting. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember, it's almost 20 years ago. But there were a lot of bits and pieces of evidence, and we ended up doing a big search warrant affidavit afterwards and laid out a lot of that in there. And other evidence that we had recovered, or things that persons told us, we passed on to Las Vegas police.
Okay. So in Las Vegas, nobody got arrested?
No.
The Las Vegas PD questioned the death row guys, but no one wanted to speak.
Correct.
Correct.
So once Orlando and them got back to Compton, did you guys round everybody up?
No, not at first, okay, because it takes a while to build up a case where you can do search warrants. But what happened was that all the players that were from Compton came back to Compton. And we were told that, hey, you know, Southside was responsible for the shooting of Tupac, so it's coming back to Compton. And what that meant to us, the war was about to start. And sure enough, like 2 days later, it started.
Okay. Now, how many people were killed during this war?
I think in the next 10 days, we had 3 people murdered and I want to say 11 shootings.
12 shootings, yeah.
Between Southside Crips and the mob Piru in Looters Park.
Okay, so just a full-blown war.
Full-blown war.
Okay. Did you guys know Suge Knight?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've heard different stories, because Suge Knight was associated with Mob Piru, but was he an actual Mob Piru member? Was he active and so forth?
Well, he grew up in the neighborhood, and at first he wasn't a gang member. He was a big football star, and he got hurt, and then he came back to the hood, and he was a bodyguard, and then he got started with Death Row Records, and then he surrounded himself with Mob Piru, and that's where he became involved with them and became one of them. We even have pictures of him throwing up hand signs
Okay.
of the Mob Piru.
He once he started providing the money for a lot of the mob, using them as his entourage, using him basically in, I'm sure you've heard all the stories over the years of extortion and just threats that Death Row Records and Suge had put on other persons. Once he started using them in a criminal enterprise, he basically became one of the leaders of the mob. And that is evidence that we got from our search warrants, including the photos of him throwing up gang hand signs for the gang. Established him as a Mob Piru member by the time he was violated for his probation and got 9-year sentence in 96, 97.
And I mean, even Tupac, at the time of the beatdown of Orlando Anderson at the MGM, man, he just got a fresh tattoo of Mob on his arm, and he was from New York. So
So Tupac was associating himself with Mob Piru as well.
yeah.
Okay. So a war breaks out in Compton. 3 people die. 11 people get shot. Does anything happen to Orlando?
No.
He was kind of laying low. I mean, we had some calls during, which was laid out in the affidavit that we did. One of the calls was at his house that he and several other Southside Crips were standing there with guns. We drove up along with our other gang detectives, and he took off running into the house. We chased him into the house. He went to a back room. We caught him. And there was, as we entered the house, there was AK-47s, shotguns, Mac 11s, and ammunition all over the place. These guys were gearing up for a war, basically.
Okay.
And we brought him in, spoke with him that day, along with several of the other ones from Southside.
Yeah,
Okay.
And a week prior to that, we had hit another South Side location on Glencoe Street, and we went to that location and we found another duffel bag full of AK-47, 40 caliber Glock rounds. I mean, weapons all over the place. And that duffel bag had an address in Vegas on Haviland Street.
Haviland Street in Las
And
Vegas.
so we knew that there was a connection somewhere for these Southside Crips to go if they needed weapons, because several years prior to that, we'd extradite several Southside Crips for murder. We'd go up to Vegas. They would commit a murder in Compton, but they'd go hide in Vegas. So we knew there was some place where they went up there, but we really weren't sure until we found that duffel bag.